Hello, everyone, and welcome to MBA Waves. I am Eric Lucrezia, as usual, with my co-host Bara Sapir, and we are here to talk to you about all things business and education. And this week's episode is called Playing the Long Game and Why Starting Much Earlier Often Optimizes Admissions Results. And this week we have with us a colleague and, let's say, new friend, Thomas Kalandranis, who's going to correct me on how I pronounce his name, who's also an admissions consultant, and he's also a personal development coach at Dia Gerontoudi Prep Center in Athens, Greece. Hi, Thomas.
Hello, everyone. How are you?
I'm good. Before we introduce you a little bit more, I want to just mention I am broadcasting live from Brest, France, like the western tip of the country where the internet is not great. So I apologize in advance if there's a little bit of internet hiccup. But besides that, I want to turn the mic over to my fabulous colleague, Bara. How you doing, darling?
I'm doing great. My internet, shockingly, in the Bay Area is not doing so great today, but I'm hoping I can join in because the early bird catches the worm, right? Isn't that what they 100%. Say?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So back to Thomas. We met because of AGAC, of which all three of us are members, the Association of International Graduate Admissions Consultants, who are, as members, we're part of this association that sort of qualifies the quality and the credibility of us as coaches, helping people, have competitive applications in the admissions space. So that's how we all met. Well, that's how Thomas and I met anyway. And thanks to Bara, I was introduced to this organization. So anyway, Thomas, great to meet you and finally have on MBA Waves. How's it going?
Great to be here, trying to stay cool in about 40, just shy of 40-degree weather here. Nice and toasty for summertime. Yeah, but it's going to get better.
What Fahrenheit, you said?
Fahrenheit, just over 100.
Yeah.
That's all right. It's going to get better. It doesn't stay like that for long.
Yeah. So for
otherwise, I'm trying to brace myself for the upcoming rush for the MBA applications, first round. It's picking up. And, with Eric, this conversation was started by chance, because I am sure all consultants face this rush when it comes down, right? And you have to get everything done in 2 to 3 months. So wouldn't it be nice if we had like 6 months, a year, 2 years to get things done? Yeah. And that's how this thing snowballed into this deal.
Yeah, it's a big topic because I think depending on whether you're applying for an MBA, master's, any kind of program, even bachelor's. I mean, I think a lot of people underestimate the amount of time that it really takes to really get things done and to do things well. Some things are a question of like, oh, I didn't realize I needed to do that. Like, the process of getting a visa, for example, for a lot of people who are going abroad or who may just haven't thought about, oh, I need to learn a new language and so forth. So Thomas and I came up with this list that we wanted to talk about of a few items. So since I mentioned language, let's talk about that now, because that's one of the things that takes the longest. If you think about it, I mean, learning a language well enough to communicate, whether it's during the program or afterwards in a job, is not something you learn overnight. I mean, Duolingo aside, whatever they're promising, I don't know. But let's talk about that. What do you guys think?
Well, there's also programs. There's also programs, for example, non-MBA programs that require you to have a language, right? So when this is actually, I think this is a great program because we're going to be talking about MBAs, but really, like you said, Eric, it's really valuable for any program that you're applying to. Like I applied to a program undergrad that didn't require it, but my grad school did. Right. So I needed to, all of a sudden, I didn't study a language for 4 years. I had studied it in high school and middle school. And all of a sudden I needed a language. Now, I don't know that business schools require you to have another language. Do they? Are there any business schools that do?
Some do. INSEAD famously requires you to speak at least 2.
Right. So it's really important to know ahead of time. I mean, reading a language is different than speaking a language, right? So it depends on the proficiency, but it could take years to learn a language. I mean, I like the method of just plopping yourself in the country and just learning it myself, but
immersion. Sure.
Well, there's also, you have to consider the unwritten rules. France is a very good example. Right, French universities, let's take the big schools, INSEAD, HEC, right? they need 2 European languages to admit you. So your native, if you're a European citizen, plus English will cover it. But we all know that if you wish to work in France, and there are many opportunities to work in France, and you don't speak French, you might as well forget it. They will not hire you. So you need to have at least a business level of French speaking ability to get a job. In other countries, they may not be so rigid about it, but you still have a huge advantage if you speak the local language, in addition to everything else. In Germany, if you don't speak German, yeah, they'll hire you, but you'll always be the outsider. Do you want that as an employee? You don't. Now, the thing of language is also more practical in class. So you took your TOEFL, you took your IELTS, you got your 7.5, your 100, your whatever. Is that enough for you to stand up in a classroom in an audience of 50, 40, 100 other students and voice your opinions, express yourself well, and then be able to field the arguments that will come your way? Because as we know, MBA, you just love to argue in class, right? So you got to have the English to stand and argue convincingly in front of very well-educated people. Yeah. So it's not enough to just get a grade. Oh, I got 100, I'm great. Yeah, you are, but can you actually do it in live? So that's the language thing. And you're right, Bara, it's sometimes not an issue of 2 months, 3 months. You may need to plan a year in advance to raise your ability. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean,
you haven't even talked about
oh, sorry. You bring up a couple of interesting points. I mean, first of all, about, scoring the required, level on the test. A 7 on the IELTS is typically required, or 100 on the TOEFL. Okay, that's one thing, but are you going to have the confidence to really communicate in class when you're filled, you're in a room filled with brilliant people, to be able to really have an engaging argument? And a lot of programs, particularly in North America, but really you see that more and more in MBA programs around the world, that participation is a large part of your grade for some classes, especially when presentations involved. So you need to not just assert, it's not about asserting yourself above the other people on your team, but really interacting as a team and showing that you can, that's really what it is about. In terms of employment post-MBA, first of all, pretty much any of the top ranked MBA programs in the world are going to be taught in English, whether they're in France, Greece, Spain, wherever. So English is sufficient technically for most programs, just having that language. However, if you want to work in that country post-MBA and it is not an English-speaking country, my rule of thumb is this: in any given country, in any given market, about 95% of the jobs are going to be offered in the local language. So there's, of course, exceptions, places like, Dubai, or even Brussels, which is quite, an international capital because it is the capital of the European Union. There's exceptions like that. But most of the time it is that way, especially, if you look at in a more nuanced way, countries like Italy, France, and Spain, that is certainly the case, where most of the jobs are going to be in that language. There, again, are exceptions. You'll find, like in Paris, Estee Lauder is there, an American company, and they use English. But a lot of people have the misperception that, oh, I speak English, I can work anywhere. Not so. As you mentioned, Germany is an example where there's a bit more flexibility. Same if you go further north into Scandinavia, like Denmark and Sweden and so forth. But as Thomas pointed out, you're kind of like the outsider. And it is important to be able to interact and have that exchange. So if you really want to learn the language, it takes about 2 years. And I wouldn't bank on you being able to pick up the language during the program. Like if you're doing your MBA in Spain, you're probably not going to just learn Spanish from zero while you're doing your MBA, because you're doing an MBA, which is pretty time consuming and intensive, that you're focusing in your business classes. And in my experience, a lot of people taking foreign language classes end up dropping out about halfway through because they just can't keep up with the foreign language learning as they're learning finance and economics and marketing and management, all that kind of stuff. So
learn foreign languages, please. You need them. That's the lesson.
Totally. So it's about, it's like a 2+ year process for doing that. But what about the admissions tests themselves? Like, especially Bara, I look to in terms of how long it takes when you consider, where you are in terms of how far in advance you are applying for the program, the expiry of the test. What can you speak to about that, Bara?
Sure. Well, the test scores are good for 5 years. So the sooner that you can take the test, if you know that you're applying to business school, the better to just take it if you have the time. And I think it's a conservative estimate to say that 2 months to 3 months is a good amount of time. I would say that that's the least amount of time that you want to consider, but it should be adequate for many students. But if you come 6 months ahead, you're able to really, and that doesn't mean that you're going to be working full time on it, but you really want to have a balanced life. Like, I think it's super important when you're preparing for these tests to not have it be your everything. Then I think that it's really valuable to take a little bit of extra time. But everyone is different. So you do a diagnostic on one of the tests, the ETS or GMAC, and you could see exactly what it is that you need to improve upon. And then you reverse engineer how long it's going to take. But the sooner that you can do that, the better. But I would say a rule of thumb is at least 2 to 3 months.
Yep.
Yeah. You agree?
Thomas, what would you say?
It's about the same, and you have to factor in a little bit the international element. Non-English speakers may have the added challenge of raising, first of all, their English-speaking ability to match the verbal portion of the GMAT and the GRE, especially GRE. But there are quite a few students who left math behind in high school, so they need refreshers, right? And we all know how unforgiving these tests can be if you're not just quick and thinking on your feet in a hurry. So we estimate that as a minimum 10 to 12 weeks, exactly what you said, Bara, is the minimum time for it. I also tell them that, listen, there are quite a few students that may need to retake the test, especially if you aim high, right? So if you need to go over 700 in your GMAT score, yeah, don't take it so for granted that you're going to get it the first time around. Yeah, it's a tough score. Yeah, it's a tough test.
It's absolutely imperative that you consider that you're going to be taking it at least 2 times. Like, that should be your program all along. And what I will say about thinking quick on your feet, I can do a quick plug on that's why it's really good to be able to read effectively, right? And that's why we created MindFlow, the speed reading platform, so that people could actually read faster, comprehend at the same level or better, and then have more time to answer questions, because that's actually what you're getting points on. So it's really like, it's a hack. It's just it's a hack to be able to have different ways of moving through the test, knowing where your strengths are, so that you don't have to second guess yourself where you know that you're doing well, and actually spend the time on the areas that you really need to really dig in. And it takes time, but like learning a sport, like learning a song, once you get it really part of you, when you go in to take the test, you want to have both things happening, that you can rely on the skill sets that you've been training for all this time and be fully present at the same time. So that's really what
you saw the notes, Bara, because half the errors in the quant portion of the GMAT and GRE are verbal errors. They read wrong. They read too slow. They need to read 2 or 3 times to get it. This is time wasted, and then it just bites you. You know it bites you, right? So obviously, fast speed reading and accurate reading, right? This is the key.
Yeah. It's such a clever trick to like how to improve your score. Like by, I can increase how fast I can, read and absorb the information. And it's so smart. Like, a speed reading class is a great little hack. I love it.
Or our platform. Or our GMAT MindFlow platform. Yeah.
Nice plug, Bara. Well done.
I mean, I think if you're a native English speaker, or you're a very strong like bilingual, English speaker, then 2-3 months minimum. But like also, like you said, factoring in that you're probably going to take it a second time, and many people take it a third, and it's not a big deal. Like someone who's worked in admissions and recruitment, I can say that we see that as a good sign of character. You're willing to work on yourself. You're willing to spend the time and effort to improve, to do better, to be more competitive, to produce. And so it's not a bad thing. It is. I've never heard anyone say it's looked down upon to take it a second time or even.
That's right. And that's way to stress. Many students are
really going to plateau. It's probably not going to go much higher unless you really change your strategy. I've heard Bara talk about before.
That's a concern for many students, Eric. They think that if they show 2 scores, it shows a weakness. It does not. Let's be clear about this. Okay? Get the score that you want, and everybody will say, well done. If it's the second time or the third time, it doesn't matter. Get the score. Yeah. Sorry for the interruption.
No, sorry. Sometimes we end up talking over each other. It's no big deal. Something else I wanted to talk about, I think it's really, really important. It's about doing research and figuring out the right fit, right? How do you know what school to apply to? I mean, a lot of people will look to rankings, which is natural. They're, widely published, and schools that are highly ranked will, broadcast that information everywhere. And that's fantastic to go to like a top 5, top 10, top 30 school. I mean, don't forget, if you're looking at the Financial Times rankings, which is, by the way, only one of them out there, there's that list of top 100 schools, but don't forget behind those 100, there's another few hundred more that didn't get on that list. So really any school that's on that list is worth your attention, to at least have a look at the website and see what they have to offer. I know a lot of candidates who are like, top 10 or bust. And it's like, really? First of all, how many people around the world, tens of thousands of people in the world want those spots, and there's not that many spots, that many seats available. So you need to be a little bit realistic. First of all, where do you measure up? But also know that ranking is not everything. And the deeper you go into your research, the deeper and the better you understand the school, their teaching style compared to your learning style, their values, does it line up with yours? What are their expertise? Where do they what industries and sectors and regions of the world do they typically send their alumni? What are your goals? What's the matchup with that? You'll start to see, okay, the rankings are not that important compared to what is the right fit for me. And this, anyone in the industry, whether you're a coach, a consultant, an admissions person, an alum, fit is everything. So that takes time as well, doing that research. A lot of times it starts with either webinars or some online events, in-person MBA fairs, downloading brochures and reading websites is obviously very important. And you should all consider that your homework, all of those things. But going further, talking to people, because really it's about people that make the program, and that includes, admissions reps, but also current students, which you can often find on the websites of all these schools, often under the name, program ambassadors, but also alumni, which LinkedIn is always your best friend. To do that. And all of this takes a lot of time. And I would argue this is like one of the most important, if not the most important, and first steps in the process that I call researching and soul searching, where you're really going deep and figuring out, and this takes many months. Like I think on average, in my experience, people that try to do it in 6 months end up like adding on another year because they realize they're not ready when they factor in the GMAT prep and all that. It's like a year and a half usually on average. So I've been talking a lot on this topic. I want to kind of turn the mic over to whoever wants to add on.
Bara?
Oh, I wanted to like highlight the researching and soul searching. And I also wanted to highlight what you said about other people, like meeting other people, alums and current students. And I think that it's really important to find the right fit, right? I think it's really important to find who, like, it's such an amazing process to find out who you are in the process, and then how you fit into different cohorts in different schools, and seeing if that's a mutual thing with the school, right? It's like dating, right? You might really be hot for someone, but they might not be so hot for you. And then you realize afterwards, like, wow, I dodged a bullet. So in finding the right school, you're really finding yourself. And it's such an amazing opportunity to be doing that. And you don't want to ever rush that, like you're all. Yeah. I mean, I think it's just a great opportunity. And each part, and I say this all the time, is like the way we do some things are the way we do all things. And who you want to be in the process, you get to choose who you want to be. And you don't want to be that 6-month person that adds an extra year, right? You want to be the person that says, you know what, this might take a year. And so I'm going to organize my time. And if it needs to take longer, it's only better for me because I'm going to be the best person I can be entering into that program.
That's very important.
I want to add something here to what Bara is saying. And it's actually somewhat advertising us. We have a unique advantage. We talk to the heads of admissions and the officers of outcomes in all these schools. We talk all the time with them. In fact, this summer, it's a weekly thing, right? We talk all the time. We hear the stories behind the stories, right? If you look at the website of every top MBA program, well, sorry to say that, they all sound alike. But we know for a fact that they're not alike at all. I mean, Bara, you're in San Francisco. How about the two schools you have right next door to you, Stanford and Berkeley? How similar are they? And yet you have students.
They're super different.
Yep, I have students that have both on the list. I go, if you're good for one of them, you're probably not good for the other. So why are they both there, right? So you need to talk with these guys. I'm not saying that you're not going to be able to fit but they're different. They have different objectives, different profile of student they're looking for, different philosophy of teaching. Yeah, I mean, I love Berkeley. Yeah, who doesn't like Stanford? But are you?
Columbia,
Good fit.
MIT, and Harvard.
Yeah. So it's not even a list of top 10, Eric. It's like the same 5 names we hear over and over again. That's how the conversation starts. And you have to explain to them that, if you blindly pick among the top 20, you'd be lucky to go there.
Yeah.
Right? As long as you select wisely something that fits you, your philosophy, your objectives, your aspirations, and your ambitions, and of course, your lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
We had this discussion about, we will not name the state, but it's a conservative state in the US. Would you want to go study there right now? Perhaps not. Yeah, if it's not a good fit with you.
It's part of it.
The school is great. Yeah.
It may turn out that Wharton, which is ranked #1 this year on the FT rankings, again, this year and on that particular ranking, is the right fit for you. And that's fantastic if it is.
Maybe it is.
Also, it's just a lot of people, I think,
tend to become governor.
Yeah. Well, tend to think that that's the right place to be in the top, again, 5 or 10 without doing the research properly. But Bara, you said something earlier that made me think of something that's quite important. And you said, if it takes another year. And so what I want to highlight there is the range of experience level and age that the school's targeting, right? They have their like sweet spot of target. And that's based on a number of factors. I would say the corporate world, right? Companies have a certain expectation for what age and level of experience MBA grads have, like not too little that they'll, because the point is that you're going to be at least a mid or high level manager after your MBA. And if you have zero experience working, how are you going to manage people? Not going to happen. If you have too much experience, right or wrong, a lot of times the perception might be that it's not going to be easy to train you, or you're going to be demanding too high of a salary or something like that. So there's a certain range, right? Now, whether you're looking at a master's versus an MBA, again, the difference is about work experience. Master's is usually 0 to 2 years experience for a master's in management. MBA, usually it's like 2 or 3 up to depends on the country, 8 to 10 maybe. And then beyond that, you're looking at an executive MBA. So if you've not really taken the right amount of time to reflect and do all the proper research, given the right amount of time to take the GMAT 2 or 3 times, perhaps, all of the components that we're going to talk about in this episode, and you end up postponing by a year or 2 years, that could be fine, but also might mean you age out of being eligible for, say, a master's or a full-time MBA, and you might be looking at a different kind of program. And that also could very much change the way you plan the next couple of years of your life. If you're talking about a full-time MBA, first of all, it's full-time. You're not working. You're probably, unless you're doing it online, you very well may be relocating, kind of like putting everything aside to focus 120% on yourself, which is an amazing thing, an amazing opportunity to do. But if you're looking at an executive MBA, first of all, they're usually part-time. They're longer programs. They're usually a little bit less diverse because people don't often relocate. They usually do not require a GMAT, but they may require an executive assessment test. So there's different things. And so if the timing gets dragged out because you haven't thought of things in advance, you haven't prepared in advance, which is why we're talking about it now, it might put you in a different category of what you'd be eligible for. So very important to think about. And Bara, thank you for making me think of that. I threw you on mute, Thomas, because it sounded like you're having a little cough. But I wanted to turn the conversation over to financing and hear what you guys have to say about that, because that's a very real aspect of the program, especially in the US. Everyone knows education is very expensive. And, when you think about a 2-year MBA program full-time, especially at some of the top ranked schools, and you think about your living expenses, all the different networking events you might be doing, you could be spending upwards to $500,000, which is insane to think about. But that is the reality. And again, cost will differ very much from country to country and currency to currency, but you got to plan the financial aspect of doing an MBA program. And by the way, the schools are probably going to ask you either directly or indirectly, how are you going to pay for this? They want to make sure that they're not setting you up for failure. They're not going to, welcome you into the program, into the batch, and then you arrive and then you don't have enough money to eat. and there's a certain level of responsibility they may feel they're taking on with that. So, be ready to talk about that. But before that, be ready to do the research on that. If that means that you're getting help from family, fantastic. As far as like sponsorship from companies, from my perspective, that's not very common, with the exception of Japanese candidates, because in that society that seems to be common. Not for full-time MBAs anyway. And yeah, loans. Almost everyone's borrowing. There's also scholarships. So I want to hear what both of you have to say about these things. Scholarships are great. Don't count on. You cannot, let your whole future on an MBA hinge on maybe I'm going to get a scholarship. It's not guaranteed, and this requires another whole set of research. So now that I've opened the topic, I would love to hear from, let's say, Thomas first, and then Bara, if that's okay. Thomas, are you feeling all right? You good? You're on mute. Let me unmute you.
Get a deterrent. My cat is trying to jump on my computer right now. Anyway, so you have to plan in advance. So if you need to save up some money, well, that takes time. You know that. If you need to raise funds, friends, family, whatever, crowdfunding, that takes time. Researching sources, that takes time. And of course, you need to consider the following. If you are planning on studying in the US and staying and working there for a period of time to amortize the cost, you have to worry about immigration. So you need to have the appropriate program, at least a STEM designation, to give you 2 to 3 years time to work. And also you have to consider what happens if at the 3-year mark you're asked to leave. It can happen. No, you're in the hole for a couple $100,000, $250,000. What do you do? All right, that's one thing you need to plan well in advance. So also you have to think whether you want it. I mean, it's funny, everybody thinks of America as a paradise, but most students, they would like to work for a bit and then return to the countries. So living in New York sounds great until you try it. And well, Bara, you know that. Eric, you know that. It's not for everyone, right? It's an acquired taste, or actually you either have it or you don't. The same goes living in one of the very cold cities that we have, northeast, yeah, or maybe living in Texas. So you have to, the job may be great, the money may be great, but are you prepared to stay 3 years working there? So you have to worry about that, and this all ties back to the money, being able to borrow it, find it, get it, and then pay it back if you need to. Mm-hmm. That's a 2 to 3 year planning process in advance, in my opinion.
And different parts, if we're talking about the United States, different parts of the United States have different price tags attached to it, right? Like the Bay Area and New York are going to be a very different price than the Midwest, Chicago, Ann Arbor, Austin. Like there's just a different standard of living and a price to live in these places, and that could be double, right? It might cost double to live where I'm living or 3 times as much than another place. So that's also something to consider.
Yeah, a huge difference in cost.
Seattle, I think, is
Seattle's gotten up there as well. I mean, New York and San Francisco are the top 2 in terms of cost of living. And we're talking about, $4,000 a month for a not so big 1-bedroom apartment. Like, so yeah.
Oh my God, it's a bargain. Where is it?
What was that?
It's a bargain. Where is it? A 1-bedroom for 4,000? Oh my God, amazing!
Put a down payment right now. I'm coming.
You would know better than me. I mean, I've been out of the States for a while, but I come back a lot. My friends, it's just incredible how, like, every time I visit New York, my mind is like remembering prices when I left in 2008, and things are so much more expensive now. It's insane. And it's just going to get worse.
Yeah, it's getting worse.
Yeah, and and there's also the visa piece of it. Like, you may have done all the steps and gotten admitted to the school. Now you have to get the visa if you're applying from abroad, and you have to prove financial stability. They want to make sure that you're not going to become a burden on the state and have issues there. You have to of course get health insurance while you're there, and you're going to need a cell phone and probably a gym membership and eat, getting around. There's lots of things to think about.
And the advance deposit for rent, utilities, this, that, the other. Oh my gosh, there's so much money that we have to pay in advance at the beginning. You have to plan for it. Absolutely. Yeah.
So we've been talking a lot about the U.S., and I just want to do a little comparison about some of the European schools, looking at like, most of the top schools in Europe. We're talking about Spain, France, Western Europe, Germany, Italy.
Well, don't leave the British behind. The UK has
Belgium,
to be there.
England.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm talking about the MBAs that I know, but please fill
Yeah.
any gaps that I may be missing. Tuition, first of all, programs are usually 1 year most of the time, and tuition is a bit less. We're talking between 40 and 80,000 most of the time for the MBAs here. And cost of living tends to be a little bit less in Europe, in my experience. Usually, like a year in France, we're looking at like about 15, 16 grand. You can pull off the year, so it's definitely a bit cheaper, but it's something to plan for. And I guess these are things you're going to have to demonstrate your ability to pay.
There is something about Europe that it's not related to money, but related to fit. One of the characteristics of European business schools is the very high percent of international students. So if this is something that you wish to have in your program, you'd be well advised to look into those. American schools at best will boast what, a 50% international mix, give or take, something like
Depends
that.
on the school, but they're far less diverse.
Depends on the school, but give or take. And we're looking at the French top schools, 90+% international presence. So if this is one of the key elements and the ambience you want to find yourself in, you'd be well advised to look into those. Yeah, I mean, LBS has that, HEC and SAD have that, and all the other schools I will know of, be they 1 or 2 year programs, they will give you that international mix, and of course a much lower cost. Absolutely, yeah.
I wanted to dive a little bit into scholarships. I want to give you guys the opportunity to speak about that first, if you have anything to share about scholarship opportunities and how those work, and kind of breaking it down.
I don't have too much to say.
Few and far away, not that. And yeah, sorry, Bara, go.
Oh, I just don't have too much to say about it, except exactly what you said, Eric, is like, do not depend on that. Like, Absolutely. You cannot assume that you're going to get a scholarship no matter who you are. And so you really have to think about how you're going to fund this, how you're going to put this forward. But I will say that, and again, this is not my area of expertise, but sometimes there's money in strange places. You won't get hundreds of thousands of dollars per se, but you can go to a place like the Foundation Center in New York, and they also have an online version of it, and find out about your ethnic background, religious background, your hobbies, and there might be scholarships and money there for you, being the unique person that you are, to be able to pick up some funding, religious organizations, etc. So that's an interesting avenue that's not always trod upon.
This, I think, is very common in the U.S., right from the undergraduate level, perhaps even in like the high school level, because things are so much more expensive. You have a lot more not-for-profits, a lot more kind of private funding, associations and organizations that offer, like, I remember in high school, we'd always hear about the scholarship for left-handed people, which I'm not, but it's another avenue. But okay, maybe I'll speak a little bit more about the scholarships at the MBA level. They're usually divided into like internal and external. What that means is internal scholarships are the ones that are offered by the school based on whatever criteria, and essentially just come off the top as a discount on the tuition that they're offering. External would be external funding. An example could be like one that I often saw was the Franco-American Chamber of Commerce, right? So you either had to be a citizen of France or the US, or have lived or done university or worked in either of those two countries, and you could potentially be eligible for a decent amount of money. It would depend, but I've seen in the range of like 5,000 to 10,000, if I'm not mistaken, euros, which is a good chunk. It all adds up. So that's an example of an external, and like what Bara had mentioned, either religious organizations, ethnic groups, and so forth. There could be opportunities there. Looking at the internal scholarships, like I said, coming from the schools directly, there's 3 or 4 main categories. One, merit-based, and a lot of schools only offer merit-based, and that often comes based on your GMAT score. So I often tell people that GMAT, yeah, and that's where you need MindFlow, you need Bara. Well, I mean, like, in my opinion, GMAT is not the most important thing. It is very important, but I think usually interviews and other aspects are a little bit more important, work experience and so forth. But it becomes very important when you talk about scholarships.
Yep.
test scores. And that's very often, like, because it is global, it is standardized, which has its limitations in terms of accurately assessing someone's potential. It's standardized, that meaning anywhere in the world, someone's taking the same test, and it's one of the only tools we have in terms of like saying like, okay, we're going to award you this much money based on how you performed in this test. It's like a contest that you prove your aptitude. So anyway, merit-based. Besides those, the next one I would talk about is diversity scholarships. Often it's about national origin, but not only. Sometimes you see LGBT-based scholarships, sometimes for women, of course, and other groups too. So check with the schools that you're looking at and see what kind of diversity scholarships and how those work. Third category is timing. So it's about admissions rounds. Every school does this differently, but often there is more budget allocated to the earlier rounds, or the schools sometimes have it on the website. Round one, if you apply in this round and are admitted, you qualify for an automatic discount of like $4,000. Round two, $3,000. Round three, $2,000. Round four, $0. For example, it's like a declining based on how early you are to apply is an incentive to apply early. So that's the timing one. And the fourth category, which I see very seldom, it's very rare, is the need-based ones, unfortunately. A lot of people do hear, A, how expensive MBA programs are, and B, that there's a lot of scholarships. Don't forget, these business schools are not charities. As much as they would love to offer money to everyone, there's a huge operating cost to an MBA program, especially when there's international travel and just the case studies. What a lot of people don't realize is schools that use the case method, those case studies, they purchase per head from Harvard, and they are not cheap. I don't know exactly what the price is, but if it's not like, oh, we have the class of 300 students, we're going to buy a case study for everyone. No, they pay for every student in that class. So the operating cost of MBA programs is astronomical, and that plays into why it's so expensive. So they're not charities. Need-based scholarships are not so common, but if you can prove that you're an excellent candidate, that you're going to be a great participant in the program and a great alumni that's going to do well at work and have some financial need, you may be able to get some. And you have to talk to your admissions counselor, admissions officer, and on a case-by-case basis and see if you can find some extra money.
Eric, to add to this, need-based scholarships, international students have extra limitations on those. So whatever exists, less of those for international students. I'm talking about US right now.
Depending on the country.
But I tell my students the following: listen, you cannot depend on scholarships because you cannot guarantee that you'll get them, right? But there is a fact. American schools, they have deep pockets. They do. Foundations, they have a dowry behind them, they have something. And they do spend the money. They do not keep it in their coffers somewhere in the back room. There is money there. However, many times you'll find those sources after you get to the university, which takes a huge leap of faith to get there, to be accepted and start your program and then look for those sources. And also requires that you have a backup. If they don't pan out, you have to have the money from somewhere else. So it's kind of a catch-22. But I have numerous cases of students that got there, they were good, they studied, they were excellent, and they were able to get additional money to fund their studies when they were there.
Yeah. True. Thank you for saying that, Thomas. And all of this just to say, not to scare people about the money stuff, but just to say that it takes time. It can be done, but this is the point of the conversation, to start early and have these conversations as early as possible. Thomas, when we were speaking on Friday, like you... Oh, sure. Yeah, please.
I'm sorry. I know that my internet is probably lagging, but what about work study and teaching assistant positions and waivers of tuition? Does that happen in business school, in your experience?
No, not really.
So work study for me is mainly an undergrad thing, an American thing, by the way. As far as TAs, I have seen that in France. And there could be a stipend, but this is like lunch money.
More like for master's programs. So for an MBA, I don't see how it could be done. I mean, this is actually ties with another point I want to make on a different topic. You have students that will pick the university or the program of their choice depending on the city. New York, Boston, right? Los Angeles. big, attractive cities where you can do many things. And I tell them, you'll be lucky to find time to do your laundry, much less about getting around town and going clubbing or going bar hopping. Yeah, the MBA programs is a full-time job on their own. So adding employment outside the program, I think, is practically impossible. Now, you can choose to enroll in a part-time program. Yeah, you could do that and work at the same time. International people have issues with working visas, and that's a big thing because ICE gets in the way. And trust me, folks, for those of you listening, you do not want to get to know ICE at all. Stay away from them. Yeah.
You're talking about in the U.S.
I see immigration. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, I fully agree with you about full-time MBAs are just that. They are full-time, and there is no time for working.
There's no time.
You'd be taking away from your experience. You'd probably have trouble keeping up with the work. You'd be skipping out on some important networking events, and you do not want to miss any of those things. A lot of schools, they're optional because they don't have a way to, like, say, enforce that you attend career services events or networking events, but you'd be a fool to not attend those things. Those are your job opportunities.
Yes.
The two exceptions to that, from what I've experienced, are either student ambassadors, and it's extremely part-time. We're talking about like an hour or two a week that you're responding to these emails. But there is a hidden benefit to that you are building network with people who either ultimately come to your school and are going to be fellow alumni with you, or who go elsewhere, but they're going to be graduating from other great schools and alumni with MBAs somewhere else. TAs, also very limited to how many hours to give you, but usually it's very linked to your specialization, what kind of work you're going to be doing in the future. So you'll be being a TA for people usually who are master's level, but they're also brilliant people just at a master's level. And you're sort of reinforcing the information you understand by restating it and teaching it to other people. So I see value in that as well. Also, it's a kind of a leadership role that you could put on your CV, could help with employment in the future.
Yeah.
So those two limiting to those two situations, I would say that's about it. But Thomas, I was going to say on Friday when we were speaking about initiatives you can take at work now that would actually kind of beef up your profile and be more attractive and make yourself more eligible and qualified.
Yeah.
What would you like to share about that?
Okay, so there's this is one of the most time-consuming moves that you will make in preparation for your master's degree or your MBA studies. All too often we see kids, so I call them kids, sorry, I'm getting older, that they have 3 and 4 and even 5 years experience. And I go, okay, listen, look at all the programs, the things they advertise they want. They want leadership, they want responsibility, they want inclusivity, and they want to see if you can handle money. If your position is fluff, or what I call fluff sometimes, and perhaps I shouldn't, it doesn't count the same as someone who's handling bottom line, P&L, or drawing the budget for the department and handling incoming flows and outgoing flows. Yeah. So you want to try to shape your professional path to include things like that. Are you managing people? That's one of the biggies that MBA adcoms will take into account. Have you had any impact at work, or are you basically an order taker? That's another big one. They want to see you contributing, changing things, affecting change, and improving the organization and your people. So that you need to think strategically how to shape yourself into that role. And to make a pass at you in the sense of ideas, Eric, think about the same thing when it comes to volunteering. We talked about that also, right? But your job, you need to start thinking 3 and 4 years in advance. Where do I want to be when I apply for my MBA? Will I have done these crucial things, handling money, handling people, changing things? That will make you a great candidate. Absolutely.
Yeah, impact. Anything that highlights or would like reinforce your experience in terms of leadership, in terms of teamwork, and international stuff, of course, makes you more attractive as a candidate. What were you going to say there?
No, nothing.
Okay. Should we pivot to visa a little bit?
I don't have much to say about this because most of my clients are European citizens and most are Greeks. And for us, getting a visa is very straightforward. You just go to the embassy, you apply for it. It's not the same day. Within the week, you got it done, right?
Sure.
Student visa is no big deal. Anything else beyond that is a big deal, of course, but that's true for just about anyone entering the U.S.
Sure. Yeah,
There are other nationalities that have to go through hoops to get their visas. That's true. Yeah.
It can be time consuming and it can be sometimes expensive. But the important thing is to go to the official government website of that country that you're going to. That is the only place that will have the most up-to-date information. And if you're having a hard time finding that, to speak to the school that's in that country where you're applying and ask them. Most of the schools will have an office that helps with international student services, resources, and so forth. And they would, for sure, know the most up-to-date, information and connect you to the right channels. It's also important when you're applying for a visa. Now, this is not part of the, let's say, research process usually. This is usually, the visa is going to take a couple of months, maybe between a month or two up to 4 or 5 months usually. But it's also important to know, I just want to mention this now, that you actually don't want to do that too early. Let's say you're applying in round 1, right, in September. You get in, you've decided in November that, hey, I'm going to Harvard, let's say. Good for you. You got in. It was the right fit for you, despite everything I said about rankings. And you don't want to apply for your visa too soon, because actually that visa, once approved, is going to give you a time frame, a window within which you're supposed to enter the country legally. And if you do it too soon, that window will come or open and close before you're ready to come to the States, in this example, to do so. So timing is important, and that's why it's important to be in touch with your international student services at those offices to get the right information.
Speaking of visas, let's not forget UK requires a visa now. At least for European citizens who used to walk in like it's their backyard. Forget it. And there is some formidable bureaucracy. You'll get your visa eventually. I mean, it's not you're not going to get it. But you have to start early because they don't move so fast.
Yeah. I think at least one more thing I'd like to talk about, we probably wrap it up pretty soon, is letters of recommendation or references and how much time that might take. So I wanted to let Thomas lead off with that.
Oh my God. It's the thing that I get irate with some of my students. We have done the GMAT prep, we have done the essays, we're so happy with the results. And then I get the question, who should I ask for my reference letters? And I go, you should be asking me this a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. And if it's going to be a professor, if it's going to be an employer, if it's going to be your boss, you need to groom this person to answer the things that they ask them in their recommendation letters. And first of all, are they willing to do that for you? Yeah, or are you just going to go knock on the door and suddenly go, oh, oops, I cannot use him. What do I do now? Right?
Let me ask you a question. Do you have in mind more master's students, bachelor's, MBA? What are you thinking about when you talk about
I
this?
get both. Reference letters, for some reason, they're in the back of their minds as, oh, yeah, I got to do this as well.
Yeah.
And comes in last in the chain of things you have to prepare.
I think one of the most neglected components of the application.
It is. And usually we make do, but there have been some pretty unfortunate cases when the time frame just wasn't enough. Yeah. Or the other thing you have to remember is that if you're applying to 5, 6, 7 schools, now each recommendation letter, especially MBA programs where they have to fill a form, click on boxes, tick boxes, and write short comments, this is easy, a 10 to 15-minute job for each recommender per school. Do these people have an hour free to do your recommendations? I mean, usually they're pretty busy. So, yeah, plan for it. Ask them.
But there's also a little bit of prep time with like helping them to help you, right? Like, these people have their own lives. If they're, first of all, okay, let's just say this. A reference must be somebody that knows you well and somebody that knows you in a professional capacity, right? So that can get challenging if you work in a family business, if you're employed, if you're an entrepreneur. That's often the case for MBA, not often, but it's more the case for MBA people than it is for undergrads or master's applicants. Does the school want a professor or somebody, a professional, an employment reference, right? That's important to know what's acceptable. Also, do they require somebody who's a current employer, or are they willing to take someone who a previous employer or someone other? A lot of times MBA candidates, applicants haven't told their job yet they're planning on leaving pretty soon, so they have to find an alternative pathway. It can get tricky. But what I meant about helping them help you is having a conversation with them that you remind them of some of your professional achievements. Let them know why you want to do an MBA or a master's or whatever it may be. Sit down with them, have a coffee with them, take them out to lunch. It's not a bribe. It's just about a relationship, and it's about they're doing you a favor. So make their job easier for them. Help them to help you, but by giving them some fodder to speak about. And by the way, when we say letters of recommendation or letters of reference, there's no letters anymore. I don't know any school that's actually reading letters. It's a form they fill out online. There's no more stamps. There's no more signature across the envelope. This is like when I was applying.
Well, you'll see those in master's programs. It's a more conventional letter form, right? Not boxes and comments and like that. But MBA programs, yeah, it's none of that.
MBAs is much more streamlined and.
But here comes the element of time. Who's the best person to give you a recommendation letter? Your mentor, who ideally you have groomed at work. Now that is a 2 to 3 year proposition, right there.
That builds a relationship. Building of a relationship
and he's the person that knows you, has advised you, knows your strong points, your weak points. Develop mentors. They're good for you anyway, but they're useful when you apply to the MBA. And they'll be your champions. They're not the guys who will say, "Oh my God, you're going to leave the job. You're going to leave me without help here." Yeah, these are the guys who will be happy to see you go. So they will support you any way they can.
They're interested in your growth, not their,
mentors.
Sustained success at work. Yeah, that's
absolutely.
Yeah. And again, you have to check with the school if they want somebody who's supervised you, a direct manager, a direct report. It's important to understand what the rules of the game are, because you got to follow them. If the school says one, don't submit 3 references. They don't want that. It's just you're being annoying. Factor in time that they might not be able to do it when they said they would. They would say, "Yeah, I'll do it for you next week, no problem." And then 3 weeks go by, and you're like, "What the hell?" Factor in that they may not. Something may come up, and this is your problem, not theirs.
Have a backup.
Yeah, having a
backup. Yeah,
100% having a backup. And also know that some schools, say the application deadline is September 1st. It's not the case for really anyone, but say it's September 1st, right? A lot of schools will give you have like a 2 weeks, maybe. Some schools are even more generous, up to 4 weeks that you can still have references submit. Because the way it works a lot of times with MBAs is you submit the application, including the information of who your referee is going to be. That will generate an automatic email to that referee, the person doing your reference. They will get that email, fill out the form, and they send it back. And so, if you say you submit the application right at the deadline, then some schools are kind and give you that like 2 week buffer or whatever it may be. Other schools are strict, and the reference has to be submitted by the deadline as well. So that means you have to think that your application's got to be submitted, let's say 2-3 weeks before the deadline, so your reference has time to get it in, because you might get cut out, and that's a shame if you're hoping to get a round 1 scholarship and now you're late and out. So just more stuff to think about. But this is why
there's a common theme here, right? Yeah. Start early. If anybody missed it, start early. And if you think you're starting early, well, you're probably late. Start earlier than that. This is something that we handle all the time. We know what it's like. And the advice is start earlier than you think you should start. This is the basic guideline. Do we have any more time, Eric, or are we out? Are we done?
Last licks, if you want to give any other tips or
volunteering. I get this is another last minute question. Oh, what can I do to bolster my CV? Go right now, nothing. 2 years ago, plenty. Yeah. So anything that has to do with social involvement, responsibility, volunteering, etc., needs to start way before, years before you start your application, and needs to become a way of life. Don't just throw in, I participate in a reforestation campaign. Yippee-yay-yo, good for you, doesn't impress anyone. Yeah. Do it for 3-4 years. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. So
I
early.
Agree. I agree.
And learn how to speed read with Bara.
Yeah, I need to get on that. Bara, anything else to add before we wrap it up?
Well, I just want to remind people that all of the skills that you're amassing for your application and being present, they're really skills for life. right? So you're building really good habits. So yeah, you have a goal. There's a directive here of things that need to happen, but you're also giving yourself the opportunity to build really great habits and skills in the process and create great relationships as well, right? Part of a bigger matrix, a bigger fractal, if you will, of being the best leader that you can be and the best person you can be, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
100%. Guys, I think that's all the time we have for today. We're going to wrap it up. But Thomas, thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure.
Oh, that was fun. I loved it.
Great to see you.
As always, you too, Bara. And just to say, to everyone who joined us today, thank you for watching MBA Waves. Don't forget, we are every Tuesday, so join us next week. We'll be joined by Linda Abraham, another fantastic coach, and we'll be talking about why right now is the best time to apply for an MBA program. Really interesting stuff based on the economy and politics and so forth. So I'm really excited to have that conversation as well. Thomas, it'd be great to have you join us as well. But thank you once again, and we'll see you next week on MBA Waves.
You'll be good.
Bye-bye.